It doesn't really matter who the creator of Bitcoin is. This is a point of contention for a lot of people getting into this space. And I understand people want to understand as much as possible when they're putting their money somewhere. But Satoshi created Bitcoin and gave it away. And just as there are many inventors in the past that have created things that we use all the time, fire, the wheel, we don't know who actually created these, and yet they are incredibly useful technologies that we build upon today. So I think it's just something we should discuss here. We should figure out, is it really that important to figure out who created Bitcoin and who started this Bitcoin?
So the creator that we know is a guy or a girl or a group of people named Satoshi Nakamoto, which there's a ton of different theories about what that means, if it's an acronym for something and who actually created it. But maybe let's, I think we'll maybe structure this in a way where we're kind of give our thoughts on, if it matters or not, then we'll talk about a few other things. And then maybe we'll get to our predictions for who it is, even though it doesn't matter. Still a fun exercise to go through, I think. So from my perspective, I think that the only way that Bitcoin could have worked is if we didn't know who Satoshi was. And if we think back to other inventions or discoveries, whatever you want to call it, throughout human history, the ones that went against these centralized authorities at the time usually didn't fare too well. They usually disappeared, you might say. And we've seen plenty of that happen in the last 100 years even. But Bitcoin is an invention that does go against the centralized authorities. It was designed to separate money from state and to take out the central banking system that we've been born and raised into. So I think that the only way that it could actually work without, anybody being able to stop it or being able to sue or make people disappear would have to have been anonymously. And I think it was very beautifully designed, and the way he went about the whole thing and kind of his path to disappearing is such a cool and unique story. And I think it just adds to the whole mystique around Bitcoin itself.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter who created Bitcoin because they have no control over it. They have no part over the rules that we follow, right? So the rules that we follow are already hard coded into the protocol, and nobody can change those rules unless they have consensus from all of the nodes that are running Bitcoin. If they don't have consensus, if it's one person it's like if you have a shareholder who's a majority holder, they can vote on something and they'll probably get their vote. But that doesn't matter for Bitcoin because there are nodes all over the world, and every single person who's running a node, or the majority of people running a node, actually, no, the majority of people don't even have to be agreeing to a change. It has to be at least two people that agree to it. Or sorry, if two people don't agree to a change, they can keep Bitcoin the same as what it is today.
Yep. Yeah. That makes sense. If there's more than one person using that chain, I think it is the longest chain that wins. That's how we've gotten to this point so far. But yeah, I mean, if everybody decided to go in one direction and then Rajat Forrest and I decide that we want to keep the OG Bitcoin, we could, because we're running the node of that initial blockchain and that initial, the chain of transactions. So I think that's accurate.
Can I ask you guys a question? Why do you think people are so worried about who created Bitcoin? Do you think it's maybe they think that the supply can change?
I think it's because I think people mistakenly look at Bitcoin as if it's just another technology and not a protocol. So people look at it like, oh, Bitcoin was invented first, even though it wasn't. And we could look back at examples like e-gold, which was an attempt at a digital currency as well. And the main problem with that was centralization, and it was able to get shut down. So I'm going off on two tangents here, but what's beautiful about Satoshi disappearing is that actually helps decentralize the network, because if there was a figurehead, they could have outsized influence, just as we look at other cryptocurrencies and we see that Vitalik has outsized influence over what Ethereum does, and they do monetary changes all the time. But again, if we look at if we think that Bitcoin is just another technology, that a better technology is going to come along the road, we might think that Bitcoin's going to be the MySpace, and there's going to be a Facebook, or Napster, and there's going to be a Spotify or something like that, right? which is just not the case. And I think that most people focus too much on the founder or the creator because they think it as a risk, right? I mean, these Satoshi wallets are another point of FUD because there's nobody knows like who Satoshi is, and then Satoshi mined all of these blocks, and then what happens to those wallets if they ever get moved, right? It's just people are evaluating risk as they should when they get involved in something, but this is just a point that isn't as important as people think it is.
Yeah, and then once you understand it, I think that's when, once you understand the Bitcoin protocol, you understand why this doesn't matter, why this is irrelevant. I also think it's part of, I think part of the reason why people want to know is because they want to know what kind of biases Satoshi had, right? So depending on where in the world you're from, let's say Satoshi was American, maybe Satoshi would want to support the American economy. If Satoshi is Russian, maybe Satoshi is trying to take down the American economy. I mean, they could be two completely the opposite in how somebody thinks, right? The end goal may be the same. The US dollar will go to zero, but the intention is what at least that's what I think. At least I think people want to know what the intention is.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
exactly what I was going to say. And I think it just kind of goes right in line with the fact that most people don't understand Bitcoin to begin with. And then the fact that there's this mysterious person who created it adds another layer of like mystery or a mystery around it. They're just like completely avoiding it for those reasons. But I think that the thing for me there is that if people actually did try to understand Bitcoin instead of just writing off because of that, they would come to the conclusion that this whoever invented it, they couldn't have been a bad actor, because when you understand the ins and outs of Bitcoin, it can't benefit one single entity. It benefits everybody. It includes everybody. It allows for every single person on this planet, whoever has the ability, an internet connection, they can be a part of this network. You can't stop anybody. You can't say no to somebody using Bitcoin. And I think that it's just that first step of trying to understand Bitcoin and getting to that conclusion where you understand that it doesn't matter who created it.
I think at
Yeah.
a certain point in Bitcoin's history, knowing or like finding out who Satoshi was would actually have been a really big risk to the network. And now it's next to impossible because you can have all sorts of evidence on somebody that they're Satoshi, all sorts of theory, and they can tell you that they're Satoshi, and even still, you have no idea if that's really Satoshi or not. And I think that it really doesn't matter anymore. Bitcoin has changed in Bitcoin has changed since its development, and it's become so decentralized that if Satoshi even came back, what would they be able to do? What kind of change would they be able to implement? I mean,
He'd be very
how?
rich.
Well, yeah, for sure, but I don't think that they would have very much control over Bitcoin, even still, because people would just say, "Yeah, that you're the creator of it, but we've taken it over. We've decentralized it sufficiently that we all now, as nodes on the network, have a say on what we think Bitcoin should be into the future."
On that note, what would happen if Satoshi came back and started dumping coins? Because I mean, that's a huge, I mean, it's still a possibility. We can't verifiably prove that Satoshi's keys have been burned or that they can't access the wallet. It still could happen. Well, how does that play out though?
The price would go down. The price would fluctuate
Yeah.
like crazy.
Temporarily,
Buyers,
right?
yeah, yeah, and they would have to find enough buyers to accumulate that amount of Bitcoin. I think it's what, like 1 million coins or something. That's a lot, right? That's a lot of coins. We saw what happened when Germany dumped like 50,000, right? And it tanked the price like 20 grand or something USD. So there had to be a lot of buyers come in to even suck up 50,000 Bitcoin, and it would really just depend on how it was implemented. I mean, it would create a lot of fear. There would be, if it happened slowly, but then people caught on to it, then it would create a bunch of speculation that there's going to be a huge amount of supply on the exchanges, continued selling, and then that would trigger people to sell even more. But again, it's not going to zero. I mean, when Germany dumped their Bitcoin, that was no longer a bag holder above everybody's head and a possibility anymore, because it had already happened. So now that fear, that ability is gone, right? That seller is now gone, disappeared. So the same thing would happen with Bitcoin, and it would create crazy price fluctuations and massive downside in price. And then it would all equalize out and build again because Bitcoin's inevitable. Everybody needs it. Not everybody understands it yet. And the max supply, fixed issuance, the difficulty adjustment, all of it just adds up to the fact that this is going higher over time.
I think one really funny thing is when people say, "Oh, what if Satoshi dumps all their Bitcoin?" They expect you to get all paranoid and worried that, oh, it's going to zero. But when you tell them, "Oh yeah, it'll go down and then it'll come back up," they get so confused. They're like, Wait, why is this guy not worried that his investment is going to go lower?" But then that's the thing, right? Once you understand how Bitcoin works, it doesn't really matter. It does. If you have a 10-year time horizon, it doesn't matter if Bitcoin goes to $1 in the middle. At some point, it's still going to be worth more. I mean, of course, if it goes down to $1, maybe we have worse things to worry about. But if it goes down to that point, eventually, I mean, if it goes to $1, I'm going to buy as much as I can, right?
Yeah,
That's my goal.
the only reason you should be worried is if you're trying to live off your Bitcoin, like if you're retired, or if
Yeah.
you're incredibly leveraged on Bitcoin.
Yes.
That's the only time to be worried. And as long as you're not in those situations, the price going down does not matter. In fact, it is a positive for you to accumulate if you're in your earning years still.
Yes. And that's what I was going to say too. It's like temporarily it would be bad. It would, you know, the price would be extremely volatile. But I do think over the long term, it would actually be a positive because not only would that piece of FUD or piece of uncertainty be addressed now, but also those million coins would be much more decentralized around the globe instead of it being held in one wallet. And I think that we can look back to this part in Bitcoin's history and see that something very similar happened like this before. And this was when China, you can see this little blip in the radar there, when China decided that they were going to ban Bitcoin mining. Yes, temporarily, hash rate went down, the price crashed. There was a ton of people worrying about this. But then within 6 months, it was right back to where it was. And then people figured out, hey, this thing's pretty resilient here. Maybe we should get some of this. Maybe we should start contributing some of our own hash power to it. And look at what happened since. And I would say that it might be a different kind of time frame on this if Satoshi were to come back and start dumping the coins. But I think that the trajectory here would look very similar to this situation.
Yeah, and we've seen in the past so many things happen with Bitcoin. We've seen Mt. Gox get hacked. We've seen Bitfinex. We've seen FTX. We've seen just countless things that seemed devastating at the time, and it's just always recovered, and it will continue because of the dynamics of how Bitcoin is built, and the entrenched protocol that it has. Right, it's really entrenched in the network with the network effect because of the protocol that it is. It's a money protocol. And I also think that, you know, Satoshi was doing what was best for him. It was really to protect himself. I think it's one thing to, you know, like Tim Berners-Lee was the creator of the World Wide Web, you know, the ICP, or sorry, the TCP protocol. That basically was built to share files and everything, and we know who that is. He's still alive today. But creating a financial instrument and protocol and network around, and it being completely decentralized and outside of the control, and not being able to be co-opted, and is really a grassroots continuing to decentralize the important consensus mechanism of it. I think that is very dangerous to a lot of the people that want to control finances and the way people act, and, you know, governments basically is what I'm saying. And you know, I think at first, you know, the first few years Satoshi was okay posting and all this, and, you know, he remained anonymous, but it was such a small project, such a thing that was just, you know, nothing. It was a nothing burger to anybody. They didn't care to infiltrate it. They didn't see that it had legs. They couldn't predict that it's becoming what it has become today and will continue to grow now. And it's becoming, the financial industry is getting super interested in Bitcoin now. They can't co-opt it, in my opinion, but they're becoming interested in it because of what it is. And it's this secondary network Trojan horse to destroy the controls that governments have on currency. But that's very dangerous for them, and they just did not realize that it was dangerous at the time. And Satoshi knew. When did he disappear? He disappeared when Gavin Andresen said that he was going to the CIA to talk about Bitcoin, that he'd gotten paid to go and give a talk to the CIA. Satoshi didn't post after that. He sent some emails supposedly after that, but he didn't publicly post. And I think, he realized, okay, I got to step away from this, because this is the moment where this could be really dangerous for me as an individual.
Yeah. Good time to leave.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think, it's, I don't like doing this, but I think it's a fun thing to do. Who do you guys think Satoshi is?
I don't know.
I have no idea. Hal Finney?
I always just say that he's Canadian as a joke.
Yeah.
That's all I say.
I mean, the theory that I've heard is actually that he was a Canadian. I've heard that it was Vitalik Buterin's father. That's one theory that I've heard. But I mean, we've also heard it's been Peter Todd. We've heard it's been Jack Dorsey.
I think it was one to me. Jack Dorsey. There's no way.
Jack Dorsey, yeah.
Elon Musk and Jack Dorsey. Those are the worst predictions, in my opinion.
The funniest thing about what you just said is that Vitalik was so rebellious that he turned around and created a complete shitcoin after his dad created Bitcoin. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, the apple does fall far from the tree on that one.
Yeah, I don't know. The thing that I always go back to is that whoever it was, I think it was it was a culmination of a lot of things, right? Like it's not an idea that somebody just made on a piece of paper and all of a sudden put it onto the internet. It was about 50 years in the making. It was components of a bunch of different things that came before it, and whoever assembled that together, they did it at the perfect time, in the perfect way, in my opinion. So I don't think that it was one man. I think that Satoshi was, personally, I think they were either a time traveler or an alien. Because I don't think any human could release something so big and so revolutionary and not be able to live to see it play out. Like it's just kind of that much of a selfless thing. I don't think many or any humans have that ability. So the thing that I always go back to is that it doesn't really matter who it was, because there's no benefit to a centralized entity from Bitcoin. Zero. There's just not. You could poke holes at this thing all day, and there is no benefit to a centralized authority, Bitcoin existing. So with that in mind, I don't know who it was. I don't care who it was. It was probably a group of people, but it was by good people. That's what I'm quite certain of. Right. So that's kind of my thoughts. Do you guys have any final thoughts before we wrap this one?
Yeah.
Have you guys ever considered that it could be AI?
No.
No? Why?
I just haven't considered it. I didn't think that
okay.
The AI would have been that advanced, unless there's technology, which there probably is, that we are unaware of. But back at that time in 2009, I don't know if, from my experience, I don't know if they would have had the ability to do it at that point.
Yeah, I think it was whoever it was very selfless. That would be the way that I would describe them. And they built on the failures of many other attempts, eGold being a really good example of that, and realizing how important decentralization was with a digital currency. And they also built on the failure of fiat, understanding that the 2008 financial crisis was entirely self-inflicted, and the risk taking was completely unnecessary, but the incentive was to take risk because of the money printer. So getting rid of the money printer is the Bitcoin, in my opinion, has the best chance of getting rid of the money printer. And that's why I'm all for it, because I think the money printer is the most destructive thing that we've ever created, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it all happened on Jekyll Island. And, if fiat didn't exist, we probably wouldn't have Bitcoin either, right? Because there would be no reason for it. So thank God for fiat. Thank God for Bitcoin. And just in case Satoshi is still out there and has access to that wallet, they have approximately 1.12 million Bitcoin in that wallet, which is worth about just under $100 billion US. So imagine having $100 billion worth of Bitcoin in a wallet and you haven't moved one single sat from it.
Yeah.
Pretty
Well,
impressive.
they probably don't have the keys, but Satoshi, if you're watching this and you do have the keys right by Rajat's head, you could send us some of that Bitcoin on the Lightning Network if you've enjoyed this show.
That's a good ending.
That's a great way to wrap. Yes, this is an important message. We're trying to get this out to as many people as possible. So that's one option right beside Rajat's head. You can send some value back here. Another thing, if you don't want to, if you can't afford to, we understand it. But you can like it, you can share it, you can comment, you can turn on the notifications. It all helps spread this good message about Bitcoin. So thanks for another great chat, boys. We'll catch you on the next one.